Hey folks. So folks will probably have seen, it's been on the news a little bit, that there's an internet subculture that has developed known as incels. And, you know, I had seen this on the news, didn't really think much of it, thought it was kind of gross. These young men, they think they're entitled to sex with women, they hate women. You know, I just didn't really want to research it. It looked kind of gross. But someone actually started to explain it to me, and the more I heard about it, the more I realized that there are some real insights into how the human mind works, and there are some things that I think we can take from this. So these incels, right? They're young men, and they have romantic difficulties in their lives. For whatever reason, you know, they're rejected by women, they feel like women are not attracted to them, and so they've created an entire internet community based on that. And they've blown up whatever their rejection is. They've blown it up into a very, very big, all-encompassing reality, right? They'll never be able to have a girlfriend. They'll never be able to have a partner. They've blown that up. And then based on that, they have developed an entire worldview around this. They have a very complex understanding of the world. They're talking about all kinds of things. You know, they've got nicknames and, you know, it's a very bizarre internet subculture. And a lot of these shootings that we've seen are actually linked to it somehow. A lot of these guys that are on these internet forums talking about being incels, they actually go out and shoot up places and kill people. It's a very strange phenomenon. But the more I learned the details about this from this person who explained it to me, the more I realized that there are a lot of people on the far left that obviously are not incels. They don't buy into that misogynist worldview. They're not in that community. But they share certain aspects of that mentality, right? So these incels, right, they have their romantic difficulties, right? They get rejected, they get hurt, and based on that, they blow that up into this belief that they'll never be able to find a partner. Never, right? They go from they're having a lot of hardship to never. And a lot of leftists in the United States fall into that same mindset. Very difficult. You know, people in the United States, in a country where, you know, capitalism is almost the official religion, where people are just bombarded with pro-capitalist propaganda. We're all raised to think that, you know, the Soviet Union was hell on earth. You know, and based on that, a lot of people fall in this mindset that it's never going to be possible to reach the broad masses of the American people. And furthermore, rather than trying to figure out what could be done in order to win people to socialism, they decide, oh, it's simply not possible, and they build these isolated communities cut off from society. And that's basically what these incels have done. They instead of trying to fix themselves up and trying to figure out what they could do in order to get a partner, they in their frustration and their rage, they build kind of an isolated community, isolated from society. And then, in order to justify their isolation, they build a very, very complicated worldview to explain why it is they'll never be able to get a girlfriend and why the situation is completely hopeless, just like a lot of leftists have done. Rather than trying to adjust their views to win the American people to socialism and try to figure out what kind of socialism might work in the United States, instead of doing that, they've developed this kind of complex worldview. You know, there's people who say, oh, you know, the U.S. working class are all just Euro settlers and labor aristocrats, and they have this very, very complex explanation about why no one in the USA will ever be convinced of socialism. There's no hope for building a mass socialist movement. And then they build these isolated communities that feed into their isolation. And if you look at the organized political left in the United States, in a lot of ways it's like that. It operates on the assumption that people in the United States will never be convinced of socialism. And based on that, they build these kind of isolated sectarian cults, and they make excuses about why people will never be convinced. It's a lot like the incel subculture, but the reality is that right now, global capitalism and the global capitalist economy of the United States is having a meltdown. And right now, polls show that Americans are more open to socialist ideology than they have ever been. I have been widely attacked for advocating socialism with American characteristics and saying that we need to develop a kind of socialism that fits into U.S. culture and U.S. history, a kind of socialism rooted in the broad struggles for democracy and civil rights and equality that have taken place throughout U.S. history. That in addition to studying Lenin, people need to study John Brown, and they need to study William Z. Foster and Eugene Debs and Gus Hall and the leaders who have built mass communist movements in the United States. I've been widely attacked for saying that. Just like these incels get so furious with anybody on the internet who tells them, well, maybe you ought to, dress nicer, or maybe you ought to learn how to talk to people, or maybe you should just be more patient, right? It's the same kind of mindset. So I'm here making this video, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but I'm urging people in the United States that have left-wing views, that advocate a socialist society where the banks, factories, and industries are controlled by the people. I'm urging them to stop thinking like incels, right? Stop thinking like incels. Stop deluding yourself into believing that Americans can never be won to socialism. Stop building isolated cults of people that are just mad. Stop hating average Americans. And instead, start figuring out a way that we can bring socialism to the broad masses of people. Start thinking about socialism with American characteristics, right? That's what I got to say. So I'm sure I'm going to get hate on this one, but do I care at this point? No, I don't. Socialists, communists, leftists in the United States, stop thinking like incels.